Welcome to the global news on October 5th in 2021. And today we start in London in the United Kingdom. The Northern Ireland Johnson Protocol is one of the most contentious points in post-Brexit relations between Brussels and London. Now the British government is threatening again to suspend the customs regulations set out here. Brexit Minister David Frost announced this in his speech at the Tories Congress on Monday, that the threshold for the application of Article 16 has been reached, which is wrong, by the way. That said the Conservative ruling party of Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Sunday already. Frost warned in his speech that the protocol is now undermining the Good Friday Agreement it set. The UK government wants to renegotiate the protocol despite the EU's refusal. As a result, London has threatened to trigger Article 16 several times. This usually allows certain parts of the post-Brexit agreement to be suspended in the event of unforeseen serious economic, social or ecological difficulties, but nothing here is unforeseen. London is in ongoing talks with Brussels on the implementation of the Northern Ireland Johnson Protocol. This provides that no customs checks will be introduced between the British region of Northern Ireland and the EU member Ireland. Instead, it is to be checked between Great Britain and Northern Ireland in the Irish Sea. The protocol actually came into force on January 1st when the UK left the EU internal market. However, full customs declarations are not expected to come until 2022. In September, however, London had already announced that it would postpone the introduction of full border checks for goods from the EU, which was planned as a result of Brexit for an indefinite period of time. According to the government, the review of food and animal products which are intended to protect against disease will be postponed from January to July next year. Criticism of the London police and the ongoing bottlenecks at petrol stations in Great Britain overshadowed the start of the British Conservative Party conference on Sunday. Despite the supply crisis, Johnson defended his government's Brexit course. Oh boy. And now let's go to Tokyo in Japan. Japan's ex-foreign minister Fumio Kishida has been elected as the new head of government. As expected, the relevant lower house of the national parliament elected the 64-year-old conservative as the successor of Yoshihide Suga on Monday with a majority of votes from the coalition parties. Kishida, who was foreign minister for many years under the former right-wing conservative prime minister Shinzo Abe, wants to present his cabinet after his election as the new head of government. According to Japanese media reports, Kishida wants to have the House of Commons re-elected on October 31st. So far, it was expected that the parliamentary elections would take place in the first half of November. Under his predecessor, Suga, the polls of his ruling party LDP had fallen in the wake of the corona crisis. In the meantime, however, the number of infections has fallen sharply in view of the now high vaccination rate, and the state of emergency was lifted a few days ago. And from Japan, we don't have to go that far. We are going to Seoul in South Korea. North and South Korea resumed communication on Monday after Pyongyang suspended them in August and caused international unrest. The South Korean Unification Ministry said officials from both states had made their first phone call in around 2 months. And they said, with the restoration of the South-North communication channels, the government believes that a basis has been created for the restoration of inter-Korean relations. The ministry said that in a statement. The following statement came from North Korea. The head of state Kim Jong-un had expressed the intention to restore the interrupted North-South communication channels, said the North Korean news agency KCNA on Monday. The move is an attempt to create lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. The decision comes just days after Pyongyang sparked international concern with a series of missile tests. The tests prompted the UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting. At the end of July, the two states had signaled something like rapprochement by announcing the resumption of cross-border communications. Communication between the north and the south had previously been interrupted for a year. But the relaxation was short-lived. Less than 2 weeks later, North Korea stopped answering calls. Pyongyang unilaterally cut all official military and political communication links in June last year after activists sent leaflets across the border against Pyongyang. And from the Korean peninsula we go to Kabul in Afghanistan. At least 5 civilians were killed in a bomb attack in the Afghan capital Kabul near the memorial service for the mother of a high-ranking Taliban official. The spokesman for the Taliban Interior Ministry, Qari Saeed Chosti, announced this to the German press agency. 3 suspects were arrested after the attack near the gate of the famous Aida Mosque. A short time later, Taliban units took action against fighters from the rival terrorist militia Islamic State. Taliban member Muhammad Jalal wrote on Twitter that terrorists in a so-called sleeper cell of IS Khorasan, SIS in Afghanistan and Pakistan are called, were caught in a house in Kabul. 3 IS terrorists have been neutralized by their own explosive belts. 2 residents told the German press agency that they had heard the sound of heavy fighting for hours. We can still hear it, but we don't know what's going on, they said. A number of houses were damaged by the fighting. Some areas would be on fire, such as petrol stores. The attack on the memorial service is said to have resulted in at least 12 dead and more than 32 injured. The Taliban recently tried to downplay the number of deaths in their own ranks. Taliban main spokesman Sabiullah Mujahid, whose mother was buried, himself reported on the explosion. He too spoke of the dead and injured without giving a number. The aim of the attack was a gathering of people. Several leading members of the Islamists reportedly attended the funeral service. It was the first bomb explosion in Kabul aimed at an event by high-ranking Taliban. The militant Islamist Taliban quickly conquered large parts of the country after the withdrawal of international NATO troops, especially the US military. They entered the capital without a fight on August 15th and have been in power ever since. The previous president Ashraf Ghani had previously fled the country. The Taliban had ruled large parts of the country from 1996 until the US-led intervention in 2001. And from Kabul we go to Brasilia in Brazil. In Brazil, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets on Saturday for the impeachment of President Jair Bolsonaro. There were large protests in Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, and the capital Brasilia. Brazilian media reported protests in 20 of the 27 Brazilian states and in 60 cities. In Sao Paulo, tens of thousands of people gathered on the central Avenida Paulista. In Brasilia, hundreds of demonstrators gathered on the esplanade of the ministries in the government district. In Rio de Janeiro, hundreds of demonstrators marched through the Candelaria district. They shouted "Bolsonaro out" in chants. The slogan was also on several large banners. The protesters waved red flags from the Labour Party of ex-President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, flags from other parties and Brazilian flags. An alliance of a dozen left-wing parties, trade unions and social associations had called for the protests. In the lower house of the Brazilian parliament, more than 100 motions for the impeachment of the right-wing extremist president have been submitted. The president of the Chamber of Deputies, Arthur Lira, has not yet responded. He is considered an ally of Bolsonaro. The demonstrators called Lira an accomplice. The Supreme Court has also launched several preliminary investigations against Bolsonaro and those around him. The main concern is the spread of false information about the coronavirus. Bolsonaro is accused of having massively worsened the corona pandemic in the country by repeatedly belittling the dangers of the virus and questioning the benefits of corona vaccinations. He has emphasized several times that he has not yet been vaccinated against corona. There are also massive allegations of corruptions in connection with the pandemic, which a parliamentary committee of inquiry is dealing with in addition to the public prosecutor's office. And something a little bit similar is a topic we are now dealing with in Bangkok in Thailand. The daughter of the controversial Philippine President, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte wants to inherit her father, according to his information. Sara Duterte Carpio will apply for the presidential election next year, reported the broadcaster ABS-CBN, citing Duterte. The president's daughter would thus initiate a U-turn because so far she wants to stand for re-election as mayor of Davao. She has not yet commented on her ambitions for the higher state office. The station cited an interview with a local journalist with Duterte immediately after Duterte had surprisingly announced his retirement from politics. Accompanied by his closest ally and candidate for vice president, Senator Christopher Bongo, Duterte was asked about the candidates for next year's election. He said, "So, it's clear, Sarah, go." The president replied, "It's Sarah, go." A spokeswoman for the president was initially unable to confirm the candidacy of his daughter. "My knowledge extends to what local media have reported. I have no comment on it." In the local broadcaster's interview, Duterte was also asked when his daughter would announce her candidacy. "I really don't know, I have no idea," said the head of state. Candidates must register by October 8th. However, withdrawals and replacements are allowed until November 15th. Duterte cannot run for president again in the May election because the constitution only allows a term of 6 years. However, experts suspect that Duterte would like to help a loyal successor into office who will protect him from legal prosecution in his own country or by the International Criminal Court for his controversial radical fight against drug trafficking, in which, unfortunately, as we have to say, thousands were killed. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.